Simon O'Connor. Simon, kia ora. Thanks for your time today.
Oh, it's great to be here, Andrew. I'm still trying to work out while of the Family First crew, I've been the one sent in on the topic of marriage. Seeing I left it so late in life.
Although you are married, so I think if you're I draw the line at talking to single people about marriage. I think that's like talking about people who don't have kids about kids, or getting veterinary advice from somebody that hates cats. I don't know. So you are married. That makes you qualified. But look, it's not about you and your experience so much as it is about the research. Let's put a positive spin on this. It seems that less people are getting divorced in New Zealand. You could say that is good news, but honestly, if you go a bit deeper, that's because so few people are choosing to get married at the moment.
Look, that's exactly right. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I can see one of Bob's graphs. Bob McCoskrie loves his graphs that, marriage rates in New Zealand have absolutely plummeted, and then along the same trajectory, the number of children.
Yeah.
New Zealand's got a real demographic decline there. But I think you're right. The fact that fewer people are getting married means there's, ipso facto is going to be fewer divorces. But what we are seeing is multiple relationships and breakups. So whether you call it divorce or not, there's still a lot of that hurt. But on the positive, we know that marriage is a great thing, both from personal experience, but also from the data. Data shows that people who are married, both together and then, if you will, each in their own right, the male and the female, are happier, less lonely. There's real benefits to marriage.
Some people would say, hey, we've kind of watered down the definition of this one. What is a significant other relationship? Well, there's not as clear a boundaries as what there used to be. You could look at that positively and say, well, hey, more people want in on this thing called significant relationship, but with them taking away the perhaps the traditional definition seems to have weakened the whole structure.
I think it has. I mean, it probably won't surprise people with my background, but I think actually words and definitions matter. And so being partnered, de facto, whatever, is not the same as marriage. Marriage is more than just a ceremony. Certainly in the Christian tradition, comes with a deep covenantal understanding. But even if you take that out of the equation, Andrew, marriage is a very strong formal commitment to one another, and expressed within the community. So it does mean something. And one of the ironies is you'll often get those that you might term progressive saying, oh, it doesn't really matter. Any types of relationships are okay. And thinking of a former prime minister whose name might be Jacinda. And yet she goes and gets married, which I think is wonderful. And so It's a very long way of saying there's a lot of talk about marriage not being significant, but more often than not, those saying that get married themselves.
Although perhaps less of a leap between, oh, look, it's just a bit of paper. It's just formalising the nature of the relationship that we've been living in for years. It's perhaps less sacred because it's less special. Okay, we have this big, expensive ceremony and all of our relatives go into debt. But actually, the way we live after the marriage isn't necessarily any different than the way we were living beforehand.
That's the common argument, but I think actually marriage is that particular moment, a set of decisions that says, you are the one I'm going to be with for life. So, yep, there's expensive weddings, there's expectations and honeymoons and so forth. But actually, I think there is a material difference, and it is based around a very deliberate decision, which is then celebrated and honored by friends and family. That's different than just simply living together. And as I say, the research is really clear. It's been something coming out of Brigham Young University, about 3,000 people as part of the survey. Long and short, those who are married with children are happier than those that are married.
Okay.
And both sets are happier than single people. And so, I mean, it's simple conclusions, but I think quite profound.
Certainly, that is the case, and something else. The economic factor, I suppose, is that it is once you get married, it's a lot more expensive to break up with the person that you've been living with previously, and honestly, good to have some incentives in place to say, let's incentivize commitment, let's incentivize couples that stay together to look after the children that they're raising together. Not all of the I suppose the legal, the political incentives in place push in the direction of being pro-marriage, though.
Oh, look, I think a very astute observation. I think there's a lot of anti-marriage narrative out there. Just pick up the mainstream newspapers or watch television. In fact, don't watch television, just tune into Rhema and Family First podcast. That'll be
Yep.
enough.
Yep.
But yeah, a very anti-marriage narrative, I would argue too, and even coming out of the political realm, there isn't a lot of support for marriage or married couples. But it's a no-brainer that actually two people living together, cooperating together, raising the children together, sharing a house, not needing two houses
Yep.
after a divorce. All of these are economically beneficial. So yeah, we could even park, if you will, the moral or cultural arguments in support of marriage and just say, look, economically for both yourselves and the country, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, economic is a good thing, although it's not overly romantic for Marriage Week in that regard. One of the things, I suppose, for Marriage Week, and I know this is what they're trying to do, is to talk about Christian marriage in particular as an example, as a ministry, as a way of connecting with and communicating positive things to the communities in which we live. Part of the challenge with that, though, Simon, is it's not to say, oh yeah, all Christian marriages are brilliant, all secular marriages or all atheists that get married, they all end up in misery. The stats aren't that much better on the Christian side of the equation than on the non-Christian, honestly.
No, agreed. And I think it's because as Christians, we live within a wider culture. And I don't think we are as apart as we're called to be in some ways. But, Christians have to work at their marriage just as hard as anybody else. And, to experience those tough times, and many, if not most marriages have them. I suppose if there is sort of a Christian theme that is very strong within the Gospels, is that we work through suffering. It's through suffering that we're redeemed. So always want to be clear to people, that doesn't mean you go running off down the road trying to cause an argument or suffering. But when we're having those challenges, that actually will in time enhance relationships if we work through it. And I think some good advice I've been given too is, particularly in marriage, if there are tensions, look at oneself first rather than putting the blame on the other. But yeah, we have work to do within the Christian community, and that behoves all of us, be it in this case media like you and I, but certainly those who are pastors and priests, to speak in to this space to help nourish the people of God to understand the importance and value of marriage.
And I think there's a thing within our society generally to say, hey, the things that we're involved with are for our own betterment. And even in some of the statistics and research that you mentioned beforehand, hey, people are generally much happier when they're married. But if we enter marriage for our own fulfillment, if we enter this contract because we're going to be better off because of it, then those marriages necessarily, I don't think that they're destined to succeed. It is that very much Christian principle about putting other people's needs before ourselves. That's what Christian marriage looks like, not that, hey, we're so much happier because we got married.
Oh, look, exactly right. If people are looking to get married just for pragmatic reasons, or they feel pressured by family, or it looks, as you touched on earlier, financially useful, probably isn't going to last. No, Christian marriage is that deeply covenantal, sacrificial dynamic that actually you are there to love and serve each other. It's quite reciprocal. And ultimately, and why it's so important within the Christian tradition, as you and the listeners know, it models Christ's relationship with his church. Deeply loving, deeply sacrificial, and ultimately too, and we better not get too theological, but it's also that mystery of the Trinity. Again, deeply relational. It's why as humans we're drawn to couple with another person, and why we call it marriage.
I mean, it is, you mentioned before, some people say, hey, people are generally happier when they are married. Appreciate also that, particularly in Marriage Week, and people, single people in the church probably get this all the time, that you're not quite, you haven't arrived unless you're married. If you are a single person, then you're missing out somehow on God's plan for your life. And that can cause a lot of heartache. Now, hey, I know your own story. It wasn't just straight out of high school that you got married. That's something that happened later in life. And I mean, Jesus, the Apostle Paul, great examples of single individuals who had a great ministry. Sometimes in our pro-marriage rhetoric, and look, not pointing fingers at Family First, you do great stuff there. But sometimes if we're so pro-marriage that people who don't find themselves in a marriage situation for a variety of reasons, perhaps outside of their control, that they can feel a little bit left out in the conversation?
Oh, I can certainly understand that. Yes, having trained as a celibate Catholic priest for 9 years, deliberate single life, I was sort of conscious of that narrative. Speaking personally, it didn't bother me. But yeah, we do put so much emphasis on marriage. But I think it's important to say, and particularly in a spiritual or religious context, God calls each of us in different ways. Some will be to marriage with kids, some will be just to marriage.
Yeah.
Some will have had marriages, but now widows or widowers. And then a lot of people are just single. And actually, God calls each and every one of us to bring about his kingdom in whatever relationship nature we find. And so I think you raise a really good point there. And if, single people are listening and going, oh, I'm not fulfilled until I'm married, that's probably not the case. God just calls each of us in a different way. And if the right person comes along, that's wonderful, as it did for me 15 or so years ago when Rachel popped into my life.
Yeah, no, super good indeed. And hey, I think it's worth talking about. It's worth celebrating. It's a good thing, I suppose, to put on the cultural horizon and say, hey, this is something we could aim towards to make our families stronger and our community stronger as well. Simon, thank you so much for the work that you do with the Family First. Thanks so much for joining us today.
A pleasure as always, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.